Okay, so we get started here. I'm sorry. It's going to take me just a second to get adjusted. Okay. All right, so I wanted to make this training here, and again, I want to apologize because of the mishaps and whatnot with training, live training, and so on and so forth. I want to make sure that I had you a video, and then this is going to be used probably in the future here, but I'm speaking to someone specific, obviously, right now. So I just want to apologize again. In this training video, we're going to be going through. Let me just make sure this is uploading right. Yeah, okay, I think it is. We're going to be going through the first page of the script, and the idea is just simply to go through, the beginning part. This is not going to stay live for a super long time, but it's just to go through the first page of the script, just to touch on all the different points. We'll actually probably go through the first page and second page right now. I think we'll have time to do that, so it won't take very long. What I'd like you to do too is play this. And then we're going to go through some quick exercises after this is done. So in addition, I'll have you play this, and then I'll have you pause it and do those exercises. Okay, so we start off. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Duffy. I hope you're Mr. Jones. Now, obviously, when we're going through that, we're not calling everybody Mr. Jones. We're going to give you actual. We're going to give you the names. You'll have them in your iPad. Okay, so hi, Mr. Jones. I'm with Renewal by Emerson. We've just completed some work for Mr. Smith at 123 Main Street, and we give you real addresses, of course, of customers. The reason I stopped here is I noticed you're going to be replacing your windows soon, and I may be able to help. Now, something that changes, during training or during when you're on the road is this: I noticed you're going to be replacing your windows soon, and I may be able to help. Okay, now that's going to change, based on the obvious, right? If you notice that they have brand new windows, you're not going to say, "Hey, I noticed that you're going to be replacing your windows." That would be silly, right? But even if you notice a specific problem, then you might mention that specific problem there, right? You'll mention something though that will segue into your window problem conversation. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a couple of examples. That now, when you're learning this, when you're studying this, you still want to use what's on the paper here, because that's going to be the most common. That's like the median, right? If the person has brand new windows and they're over here, if they have really old windows and they're over here, this is the median. This is the in between. So this is going to be the typical, the typical, of what you say, right? It's going to be the typical part of what you say. Sorry, I just got to lens wipe my glasses and computer here. So a couple other examples that I'll give you. Okay, let's say that the windows are brand new. Okay, it's clearly evident that they're brand new. Now, if you don't know, if you're not familiar with the age, you want to ask them before you accuse them of replacing the windows recently, right? I mean, by accuse them, obviously, I mean like if you go out and you say, "Hey, I noticed that you replaced your windows," and they're not new, then the customer's going to agree with you anyways, typically, or they're going to think you're an idiot, one or the other, or both. But they'll agree with you typically because it gets them out of this situation, and they recognize that these customers, they're not dumb for the most part. And I'm just kidding. They're not dumb. They know exactly what we're doing. And so they're going to, if you hand them an out, then they're going to take the out, because not because they don't like you, not because they don't want windows, not because they don't need windows, just because that's what they're trained to do as a customer, as a consumer. We're all trained to do that. Right. So, we have to recognize that. And so if they have newer windows that are extremely new and you can tell that they're new, then fine. Let them know that, hey, Mr. Jones, I noticed that you had replaced at least some of your windows here. How many do you have left to replace? Right. So that's the avenue that I go down, because I noticed you replaced at least some of your windows here. How many do you have left to replace? Okay. So that would be an example. I noticed that you had to replace the windows here, Mr. Jones. How long ago was that? Okay. If you're not 100% sure, then I noticed you replaced your windows. You replaced some of your windows here, Mr. Jones. How long ago was that? Okay. If they're really, really bad, let's say they're rotting out of the house, okay, then I might say the reason why I stopped here is because I noticed that your windows are rotting pretty severely, Mr. Jones. How long ago did that start? Okay, a question like that would be appropriate there. Okay, but if I'm just going through, again, normal house, some problems, not too significant problems, but just regular old problems, then I'm going to say, so I noticed you might be replacing windows soon, and I may be able to help. And the question I like to ask there right after that to get into the need conversation is, now, how long have you lived in the home, Mr. Jones? Okay, now first, Mr. Jones, how long have you lived in the home? Okay, now this propels me to the need conversation. Okay, now the need conversation is not something that we're going to go over right now, because that requires an entire day training. That's what you'll come in the office for. But I'm going to go through an example of that conversation. Okay, let's just say, for example, we knock on the basic, vinyl windows. They're 15 years old. There's a couple different problems, and the way that it sounds like this. So, Mr. Jones, I noticed you're going to be replacing windows soon, and I may be able to help. Now, Mr. Jones, how long have you lived in the home? Oh, I moved in like 2 years ago. Okay, cool. So you're getting acquainted to the neighborhood and stuff like that. Probably acquainted to the home. Then I don't know if you had noticed this, Mr. Jones, but vinyl windows that are this age, probably 15 years old or so, they'll start to deteriorate pretty quickly. And so they'll start to oxidize and start to wear down. Okay, now that's why you can see like the discoloration surrounding your windows. Okay, now I don't know if you noticed this, but the glass looks like it's starting to warp a little bit on the glass. Okay, and so you can see like a mirror effect, like a funhouse mirror effect. Have you noticed that before, sir? No. Okay. All right. Well, I can show you right here, and then I point out the problem. Okay. Now, the other thing that lets me know these windows are rotting, Mr. Jones, is that it looks like there's some kind of fog and condensation starting to grow inside the glass. Now, what kind of windows did you have in your old house, Mr. Jones? Old wood windows. So I thought these were great. Yes, sir. And unfortunately, a lot of people, there's a lot of propaganda around vinyl windows. There's a lot of information. They don't rot, for example, right? Like we know that they're plastic, right? So they don't rot. They don't conduct the cold and hot weather, but they do have a lot of other problems. I noticed that this one here didn't look like it locked properly. Has that been going on since you moved in? Yeah, I mean it's hard to lock. I mean, if we can even get it locked, then we have to push it, okay, sir. And it's one of the first things I noticed walking up. Now our company background checks every employee, but not every company does, and so it is a dangerous issue. It's also an energy efficiency concern, sir. When that window doesn't lock, you're going to lose about 30% of your energy efficiency in that window because of that. Okay. So then I transition into the next part. And that's just an example of a conversation. It could, depending on the type of windows and the problems that you see, that conversation will be different. And that's why we don't script it out. Okay. But that's just an example of how it will sound. So after we're done with that, we transition into, so Mr. Jones, you do know that you're going to have to replace your windows in the next couple of years. May I make a suggestion? Okay. Now the may I make a suggestion question is extremely important. Okay. Because see what we're trying to do. We're not trying to berate or batter customers. The difference between us and a lot of other companies is that we're trying to form a bond through agreement with the customer, right? We're not, I mean, don't get me wrong, like we'll be, assertive. Okay. We're not gonna be aggressive, but we'll be assertive in our conversation. But the goal is to not be aggressive. The goal is to not come off like a jerk. And you don't have to do that in sales. A lot of people are in marketing. A lot of people think that, with sales processes, that's what you have to do. And we completely disagree. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a point in time where that's exactly how we thought. The more aggressive you are, the better off you'll be. No, we believe in not giving up, but I mean, there's a difference between not giving up and being a jerk, and so you can not give up and also communicate effectively with the customer. Asking a question like, may I make a suggestion? It's a communication question. You're asking their permission to move forward. But it's not, if they say, God forbid they say no, which they typically won't say no to that, but God forbid they do say no, then you can still respond back, so you can still, a good example is, may I make a suggestion? No, not right now. Okay, so well, of course I didn't expect to catch you on the day that you're ready to replace your windows. That being said, all I like to do is have somebody come out at your convenience, of course, or okay, sir, well, what we can do is send somebody back out at your convenience just to see if we can do what needs to be done here, find out what you like, so on and so forth. Okay. So there's ways to get around that if they were to say no, but typically what you'll hear there is you can make your suggestion, but I'm not interested. And the benefit of that is that, you can you focus on the positive, move forward, making your suggestion. But that the person's going to give you resistance at that point. So at least you understand that that's going to happen. Okay, but they've also they voiced some of their objections right there with the not interested. So their objections should typically change, and that's a good thing for you. That means that the customer is evolving in the conversation, and when we go over rebuttals and stuff like that, you can start to identify what's wrong with the customer, not what's wrong with them. Obviously, you know what I mean. What's wrong with the interaction and how you can fix it, how you can fix that consumer interaction. And so, we'll focus a lot on that, but that question really, really starts that. Okay. So this next part, the value of the visit, it's long. It's the longest part that we have the script, but it's a very important part, very awesome part to what we do. And it's meant to adapt to the customer situation. Okay, so again, we're trying to, form agreement here. So I'll go through it and then I'll explain it to you. So one, my form needs to see your windows to make sure that we can do what needs to be done and find out what you want. And if we can't be a service to you, then we'll be glad to recommend someone else who can. But if we can help you, then we'll show you our windows and we'll show you how they're installed. So if you like what you see, we'll simply take some measurements and give you a price. That way, when you're ready to do something, it can be done, what it'll cost. Does that at least sound helpful to you? Okay, now, the importance of that section there again is that it can adapt to the customer's needs, right? So this is something that's a little bit more advanced. I wouldn't worry about it right now. We're learning this word for word. Like people ask me that question all the time. Should I learn this? Do I have to learn this word for word? And the short answer is yes, but the better answer is it's not about what you have to learn, it's what you have to do, right? I mean, the consumer is going to change, the customer is going to change the way that you're talking to them. They're going to adapt that. You don't have to worry about that because they're going to screw it all up for you right in the beginning, So it will take care of itself essentially. Okay. But just an example of how that could change. Let's say, for example, the customer is saying something like, no, we're doing our roof first. So we're definitely not going to do windows this year. And I'd agree. I'd say, yeah, the roof is super important. That definitely makes more sense to get that done now before winter. Absolutely. But sir, all we'd like to do is just somebody come out just to check the windows then to see if they're even worth entertaining doing at some point in time. And if they're not, or if we can't be a service to you, then we'll just recommend someone else who can. But if we can help you, then we'll show you our windows and we'll show you how they're installed. So then at least if you like what you see, we'll take some measurements and leave you with a price. So when you're ready down the line, at least you have the information set aside. Does that at least sound helpful to you, sir? So you can see how that kind of adapts. You can see how that sort of changes, Sorry, I was doing a draft, but the site crashed and stuff like that. So we had to kind of reschedule it and whatnot, but I wanted to check on that just to see if it was working out. Somebody left me Dalvin Cook at 3. That's kind of crazy. But anyways, so after does that sound helpful, we have one of the most productive parts. Now, by the way, too, the question, does that sound helpful itself? Perfect question for here. We're not asking the customer, does that sound good? Does that sound like fun? Does that sound, does that, fancy your liking? I don't know. We're not asking the customer anything like that. We're asking, does that sound helpful to you? Okay. I actually oftentimes find myself saying, does that at least sound helpful to you? Okay. And the reason why is because typically, some will say no, but they'll either tell you a reason why they're saying no a lot of times. Okay. Listen, nothing is absolute with this job. Okay. That's what makes it fun. So yeah, sure. Sometimes people will just be like, nope, not happening. Okay. But typically they're going to say no because, which is answerable. Okay. Or they'll say yes, but. Okay. So they're usually not going to go absolutely perfect because you would have already known if they were there. They would have already shown a lot of interest if they were there. You will get some people that do that, but not enough to make commission. I mean, not enough to make a significant amount of commission anyways, but you get a couple people like that per week, but not super often. And even then you have to build a relationship to get those people. So does that sound helpful? Okay. Does that at least sound helpful? We'll solicit a response like, for example, I mean, sure, it sounds helpful, but, I'm not thinking about saving for Windows yet, and then I could respond with something like, well, of course, sir, I wouldn't expect you to do that. But this gives you the tools so that when you do need to think about it, when you do eventually need to think about saving for Windows, you at least have the information set aside. Okay. Or you could just use the next part of the script, which says, great, Mr. Jones, because the goal of this visit is to discuss all your options, answer our questions, that we can give you an exact price to the penny in writing, good for 1 full year. I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? Okay. Now, the benefit of that section is it's perfect just the way it is. You can use it just the way it is. But the other benefit of it is, I'm trying not to wake up my kids. I just remember that I'm trying not to wake up my kids. The other benefit is that you can use this as a rebuttal. So if the customer was to say something like, does that sound helpful? I mean, it does, but not right now because I'm doing the roof over and stuff like that. Well, no, of course, sir. You already told me that you weren't going to do this yet. And that's absolutely fine. The goal of the visit is just to go over your options, answer any questions that you have, and then leave you with an exact price, good for 1 full year. So I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? Right. So it propels you forward either way. And, that's the whole premise of this entire thing is moving the conversation forward. Okay. Now I hope that was helpful. And what I decided was, given the title of the video and stuff like that, and the exercises that I want you to do, I'm going to cut it off at the first page when it comes to the learning portion of this. Okay. But I do have a couple exercises that I want to do because, again, I know that we're missing out on some training and stuff like that. So let's start at the top. Okay. So there's two ways to learn this. All right. And everybody learns differently, but there's two ways to learn this. The first way to learn this is top down. Okay. And that's the way that I think is best. But for some people, tackling the big parts first is important. So, you can jump right to the value of the visit, for example, learn that, and then go back and learn the rest. Okay. Now, here's what I want you to do. Okay, I want you to listen to these directions. Okay, pause the video and then go over these exercises for each part. Okay, so the first exercise that I want you to do is we're going to take this introduction. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Duffy. I hope you're Mr. Jones. Hi, Mr. Jones. I'm with Renewal by Andersen. We've just completed some work for Mrs. Smith at 123 Main Street. The reason I stopped here is I noticed you're going to be replacing your windows soon, and I may be able to help. We're going to take that part. Okay, now what I want you to do is pause this video. And I want you to write that down 10 times. Okay, write it down. And when you write it down slowly. Okay, good afternoon. Say it out loud as you're writing it down. Good afternoon. Think about it. Okay, really process it. Okay, let's do it 10 times. Again, write it down 10 times. I know it's a lot, but write it down 10 times. Okay, and then you'll unpause this video. Okay, when you unpause this video, this next part here, we're going to say this back and forth a little bit. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time this out. It's not going to be perfect, but I won't even time it out. That would be too difficult. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to keep. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it nice and slow, and I'm going to ask you to keep repeating this video. Okay, repeating this small section. And what I want you to do is I'm going to say it. Okay, nice and slow. Then I want you to repeat it. Okay. Try in the beginning. Try to read it off paper and stuff like that. That's fine. Okay. And then I want you to play this again and repeat it again. Okay, we're going to do this exercise 10 times as well. Okay. All right, ready? Good afternoon. My name is Paul Duffy. I hope you're Mr. Jones. Hi, Mr. Jones. I'm with Renewal by Andersen. We've just completed some work for Mrs. Smith at 123 Main Street. The reason I stopped here is I noticed you'd be replacing your windows soon, and I may be able to help. Okay. All right, great. So, if you're at this part here, then you just rewinded that a bunch of times. Okay, good. Excellent. So you did that 10 times. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to diversify the way that we study. Okay. Everybody has a proper way to study, but I mean, if you're like me, I've been out of school for a long time. I have problem memorizing things, years of abuse to my brain, I guess, but that's just the way it is, right? So learning stuff like this can be difficult. So we're trying to diversify the way that we're learning. Okay. And that's the reason for doing these different things. Okay. So we got one more exercise that we're going to do. So we just wrote this down 10 times. Okay. Then we read it. We read it back and forth together 10 times. Okay. Now what I want you to do is actually two more things is I want you to pause this video and I want you to take the next 10 minutes and I want you to read that. And now if you don't need the 10 minutes, if you feel like you don't need it, then that's fine. But anything that you can do to reinforce this is good. So I'd take as much time as possible. Okay. So just take 10 minutes and I'm going to study this in your head. Okay. We're really going to try to hit every point of memorization. Okay. For each part of this. Okay. So go ahead and do that. Pause the video and then come back to it. Okay. Now you've come back to it. And now we're finally on our last part. Okay. Now the part here, this is about making sure that you know it. Okay. Now what I want you to do is, okay, I'm going to say this one more time out loud. Okay. Slowly. And then I want you to pause this. I want you to try to repeat it. I'd like you to find a mirror to do this. If you can visualize yourself saying it, it's even better. Okay. Maybe look into your camera on Zoom, something like that. All right. That's the best way to do this is to see yourself saying it. Okay. And I want you to do that until you have this down perfectly if you don't already. Okay. So I'm gonna do it one more time and then you can pause it and do the same exercise. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Duffy. I hope you're Mr. Jones. Hi, Mr. Jones. I'm with Renewal by Andersen. We've just completed some work for Mrs. Smith at 123 Main Street. The reason I stopped here is I noticed you're going to be replacing your windows soon, and I may be able to help. Okay, we'll end part there. All right, and hopefully get that down. Now, this need part we're doing next, okay? Now, again, or we're not doing next. That would come next, okay? We're going to skip right over that, and we're going to go right down to this value of the visit, but we're going to start with, may I make a suggestion, okay? Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through this part's a little bit tougher, obviously. We're going to go through, may I make a suggestion, down through, does that sound helpful? Okay, so this highlighted part here. All right, now we're going to do the same thing. So what I want you to do is write this down first, okay? 10 times. I know it's a bit longer. It's going to take you a little bit longer, but write it down, pause this and write it down 10 times while reading it. Again, process all the information, okay? If you need to do this in parts, then break it into parts, okay? Break it into 2 parts if you need to, all right? I know it might void some of this training, but if you need to, then do that, all right? If you don't need to, great, write it down 10 times, try to process it. What I'd say about this part is when you get done, if you don't know it, just repeat the entire process, okay? Repeat the entire process. All right, now what we're gonna do is like we did last time, is we're gonna read this back and forth to each other, okay? So I'm gonna read it slowly into the camera, and then I'm gonna have you do the same thing. Just pause this, turn it back, and then listen to it again, okay? May I make a suggestion? One of my form needs to see your windows to make sure we can do what needs to be done and to find out what you want. Now, if we can't be of service to you, we'd be glad to recommend someone else who can. Assuming that we can help you, we'll show you our windows and how they're installed. So if you like what you see, we'll take some measurements and give you a price. That way, when you are ready to do something, you'll know what can be done and what it'll cost. Does that sound helpful? Okay. All right, good. So repeat that a couple times. All right. Let's say 10 times for that. And it might require more again. If it requires more, great, then go back and do it. That's fine. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do again is we're going to spend some time reading this in our head. Okay. So I'm going to repeat it one more time. And then what I'd like you to do is just take 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more this time, and just try to learn that in your head. Okay. May I make a suggestion? One of my foremen needs to see your windows to make sure that we can do what needs to be done and to find out what you want. If we can't be of service to you, we'd be glad to recommend someone else who can. Assuming that we can help you, we'll show you the windows and how they're installed. So if you like what you see, we'll take some measurements and give you a price. That way, when you are ready to do something, you'll know what can be done and what it'll cost. Does that sound helpful? Okay, go ahead. Okay, finally, the last thing that you'll be doing is doing this in the mirror. Okay, and again, like I said, I'd suggest that I'm going to do this one more time. I suggest that you either turn on the camera and watch yourself there. We'll find a mirror to do this. If it's in the bathroom, if it's a whatever, grab whatever you can do. Okay. May I make a suggestion? One of my foremen needs to see your windows to make sure that we can do what needs to be done and to find out what you want. If we cannot be of service to you, then we'd be glad to recommend someone else who can. Assuming that we can help you, we'll show you the windows and how they're installed. So if you like what you see, we'll take some measurements and give you a price. That way, when you are ready to do something, you'll know what can be done and what it'll cost. Does that sound helpful? Okay. Great. Last part. We're on the last part. Okay, this is an easier part to learn, and so kind of save the best for last, right? So we're going to do the same process here, okay? So first thing you're going to do is you're going to write this down 10 times. I know it's repetitive at this point. Now you probably spent a couple hours doing this, maybe even now. Great, Mr. Jones, because the goal of this visit is to discuss all of your options, answer your questions. That way we can give you an exact price to the penny in writing that's good for 1 full year. I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? Okay. Great, so write that down a good 10 times. All right, excellent. And now we're going to do our repeating process. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. Great, Mr. Jones, because the goal of this visit is to discuss all of your options, answer all of your questions. That way we can give you an exact price to the penny in writing that's good for 1 full year. I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? Okay, so record that back, rewind that back, and do that process again. Okay, finally, we have our study time. Okay, so take 10 minutes to kind of go over this and learn this. And again, I'll repeat it. Great, Mr. Jones, because the goal of this visit is to discuss all of your options, answer all of your questions, that we can give you an exact price to the penny in writing that's good for 1 full year. I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? Okay. And again, our mirror part, I'm going to do it one more time. Great, Mr. Jones, because the goal of this visit is to discuss all your options and answer all your questions. That way we can give you an exact price to the penny in writing. It's good for 1 full year. I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? I probably could save myself a lot of time by just saying it once and telling you to rewind it over and over again, but that's okay, right? I like to hear myself talk anyway. I'm just kidding, kind of, not really, right? But I'll make another training video. We'll connect again. Okay, I want to get this training done. I want you to, I'll text you with further directions, but I look forward to meeting you, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you working with me on this. Thank you.